Welcome back, everyone. It seemed like you're really drawn to this case, and you know what? I get it. It's a story that starts off pretty normal, everyday life stuff, but then, bam, it takes some seriously dark turns. Are you ready to dig into this one with me?
Absolutely. Let's get into it. So we're heading to Grand Junction, Colorado. Picture this. A quiet, unassuming guy named Warren Barnes. Locals knew him as the reading man, and then poof, he vanishes.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So tell me, who was this Warren Barnes, and what made his disappearance so strange?
Warren, he was a man of routine. Like, you could practically set your clock by him. Every single day, you'd find him outside Monique's bridal and formal wear, just lost in a book. He was a beloved local figure, known for being gentle, enjoying simple things. He was also super reliable, worked at a temp agency for 4 years, never missed a day. But then on February 27th, 2021, he just didn't show up.
And that was totally out of character for him.
Oh, yeah, completely. His disappearance sent shockwaves through the community. His employers were instantly worried, and even Monique, the bridal shop owner, started searching for him herself.
Wow, that says a lot about the kind of guy he was. But this is where things get really interesting, right? There was this car accident that happened that same weekend.
You got it. That very same weekend, a 19-year-old named Brian Kohe, he accidentally drove his car right into the Colorado River. At first, it seemed like just a crazy accident, nothing more. Brian was fine, and the police, they were actually pretty chill about the whole thing. Brian's dad even joked about how much the accident was going to cost and how Brian needed to go home to get some pants.
Okay, so at first glance, it's almost a funny story. But this all becomes super important, right?
Exactly. Things got a bit darker when the tow truck crew found blood on the car's bumper while pulling it out. Even though Brian Jr. kept saying he wasn't hurt, suspicions started to grow. Then, the next morning, Brian's father, Brian Sr., found a wallet in the car. Belonged to someone else. Oh, and a large knife, too.
Hold on, a what? Wallet and a knife. Talk about a coincidence. Did they figure out if those belonged to Warren?
Well, as it turns out, they did. Brian Sr. called the temp agency listed on a business card he found in the wallet, and you won't believe this, but it belonged to Warren Barnes, the missing reading man himself. Brian Jr. said he found the wallet by the river, but just as this chilling connection came to light, something even more terrifying happened. While Brian Sr. was making that call, his wife, Terry, stumbled upon a bag in Brian Jr.'s room, and inside that bag was a human head.
Whoa, things took a dark turn fast. This is just unimaginable.
It's truly horrifying. The 911 call Terry made is just bone-chilling. You can hear the pure terror in her voice.
This is beyond disturbing. So what happened when the police got there?
When the police arrived at the Kohe house, they were met with a shocking confession. Brian Jr. admitted to killing Warren Barnes right there on the spot.
He just came right out and said it.
Yep, no hesitation. And his reason? Chillingly simple. I've always wondered what murder felt like. He went on to casually mention that he'd gotten rid of the body in the river, which suddenly connected everything back to that car accident. There was no remorse, no second guessing.
This is insane. If he had the wallet, why dump the body? Was he trying to make the police think they'd find Warren somewhere else?
That's a really good question. It's one that the investigators definitely thought about, too. Did he freak out after hitting Warren with the car and just get rid of the body, only to realize he still had the wallet? Or was there something more planned, more sinister going on? This is where the investigation takes a turn, and the evidence starts to paint a clear picture of what actually happened. So let's look into what the police found, shall we? They searched Brian Jr.'s car and found a backpack, and inside, blood-stained clothes, oh, and a hammer. Then, under the bridge where Brian Jr. said he'd killed Warren, another gruesome discovery, they found more body parts.
Oh gosh, that must have been just awful. I can't imagine what those officers went through. So what did they find out about how the murder happened from Brian Jr.'s confession?
Well, during his interrogation, Brian Jr. was totally calm, like it was no big deal. And he gave a very detailed account of the whole thing. He said he stabbed Warren multiple times with a huge kitchen knife. He even showed them how he did it. The really creepy part is, he said he was making these animal noises while he was stabbing him and kept saying the words stinky and dirty over and over, even though he insisted there wasn't actually any bad smell.
That's just chilling. It seems like there was so much rage there and such a disconnect from reality. It's hard to wrap your head around it.
Right, and there's this other side to him that's almost more disturbing, this really practical side. He talked about how he tried to cover up what he did, like he was cleaning up a spill, not a murder scene. He took all the trash out of his car, washed his bloody clothes, like twice, even tried to get rid of the body in the river to hide the evidence.
Wow. Sounds like he thought he was going to get away with it.
Yeah.
So do you think he planned it all out, or was it more of a spur-of-the-moment thing?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Some of what he did, like trying to cover it all up, makes it seem like he thought about it beforehand. But then there are things that seem more impulsive, like he just snapped. To really understand what drove him to do something so horrible, we need to look into his psychology, what was going on in his head.
Okay, yeah, let's get into that. What was his background like? His mental state? Were there any signs that something was wrong?
Well, they talked to his parents, and from those interviews and from his interrogation, you start to get a picture of a guy who was fighting some serious inner demons. His parents said he was obsessed with crime, like for a long time. He had tons of true crime books, loved shows like Silence of the Lambs, even had something his parents called a murder kit.
A murder kit?
Whoa.
Seriously? That's
Yeah.
really scary. What was in it? How did his parents react when they found it?
It's not exactly clear what was in it, but the fact that it even existed is a huge red flag, right?
Yeah.
His parents also said he had this really dark sense of humor and would say things he knew would upset people. They thought he might have autism and ADHD, and they did try to get him professional help.
So they were worried about his mental health. They were trying to do something. What kind of roadblocks did they run into, with getting him the help he needed?
It seems like they face the same problems a lot of people have with the mental health care system, especially for young people. Long waiting lists, not enough resources in their area, even missed appointments. Unfortunately, those are pretty common obstacles to getting care when you need it.
It's just heartbreaking. It shows just how big of a problem this is for everyone. I wonder, if things had been different, if it had been easier to get him help, could this whole tragedy have been avoided? It's impossible to know for sure, but it definitely makes you think about how important it is to get help early and have support.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hear from Brian Jr.'s mom, Terry, talking about trying to make sense of what her son did.
It's just devastating. You can hear the pain and confusion in her voice. I can't even imagine what she must have been going through. So do you think his history of disturbing behavior and his possible mental health issues explain everything? Or was there something more sinister at play?
That's a really tough question. On the one hand, it's clear that Brian Jr. had some serious problems. He was acting out, and he might have had some underlying mental health conditions that weren't being addressed. But there are a lot of people out there who struggle with the same things, and they don't hurt anyone. Some experts think that his obsession with true crime, all those books and shows, might have made him less sensitive to violence, so the line between fantasy and reality got blurred for him. What do you think?
It's tough, isn't it? On the one hand, we have to understand how mental health can influence behavior, but on the other hand, we can't let that be an excuse for something this horrific. It's a fine line, recognizing that mental health is complex, but also making sure he's held accountable for what he did. So, what happened legally? Did the court take his mental health into account during the trial?
Brian Jr., he pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Basically, that means he was saying he didn't know what he was doing was wrong because he had a mental illness.
So he was saying his mental state was so bad he didn't understand how serious his actions were. That's a hard argument to win. What exactly did they argue in court?
The prosecution, they said that everything Brian Jr. did, how he tried to hide the crime, showed that he knew what he did was wrong. They pointed to the fact that he tried to get rid of the evidence and that he lied to the police at first. It seemed like he was trying to avoid getting caught, which means he understood there would be consequences.
Yeah, that doesn't really sound like someone who didn't understand what they were doing. What did the defense say?
The defense focused on all of Brian Jr.'s disturbing behavior, the potential mental health issues, and the fact that he wasn't getting the help he needed. They said that his fascination with violence came from this inability to separate fantasy from reality, so he couldn't really tell right from wrong.
So the trial came down to whether Brian Jr. really didn't understand what he was doing, or if he was just trying to get out of trouble. What did the jury decide? Did they believe he was insane?
Although the jury, after a 12-day trial, they decided that Brian Jr. wasn't insane. They found him guilty of first-degree murder. The judge, he'd been on the bench for 37 years, seen a lot, and even he said it was one of the worst cases he'd ever seen.
Wow, so even someone who had seen it all was shaken by this case. What was the sentence? Did what the judge said about how awful it was, did that affect the sentence at all?
Brian Jr. was sentenced to life in prison, no chance of getting out, plus another 13 and a half years. It's a lot harsher than what he thought he'd get. He thought he'd only get 15 years. What the judge said definitely showed how serious the crime was and how much it affected everyone in the community.
Life without parole. That's tough, but maybe it's the right punishment for what he did. Still, it doesn't bring Warren back. What about him? Did the community do anything to remember him?
Yeah, they did. After everything that happened, the people in Grand Junction wanted to make sure Warren Barnes wasn't forgotten. They made a memorial for him outside Monique's bridal shop, where he always sat and read.
That's nice. What's it like?
It's a sculpture of a chair, like one you'd see under a tree with a bunch of books stacked up. It's meant to be like, he loved to read and he brought a sense of peace to that spot.
Hmm.
It's sad, but it's a good way to remember him and the life that was taken away.
Yeah, it sounds like a really fitting tribute to him. This whole case, it makes you think about a lot of things, doesn't it? Mental health, taking responsibility for your actions, how violence affects everyone. It shows you that bad things can happen anywhere, and that people's lives can be changed forever in a second. So as we wrap things up here, what are some of the main things you hope people take away from this?
I think this case really highlights how important mental health is, especially for young people. We need to be able to spot the warning signs, make sure people can get help, and stop treating mental illness like it's something to be ashamed of. That's how we can prevent things like this from happening again. And we have to remember Warren Barnes. He was a good man, more than just a victim. His life mattered, and we should never forget him.
This has been a tough story to hear, but it's been really eye-opening. It makes you think about human nature and the systems we have or don't have to deal with mental health problems. We've gone over a lot today, and I encourage you to learn more about this case. We'll have links to more information, articles, documentaries, interviews, all kinds of stuff. Dive deeper into the parts that really resonated with you.
And if this deep dive got you thinking, or if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. It's important to talk about these things, even when they're difficult.
Thanks for joining us today. Remember Warren Barnes, and let's hope his story can make a difference in the world. Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and take care.